Greetings, building science enthusiasts, and welcome back to the Building Science Podcast. This episode is proudly brought to you by the Healthy Building Network. HBN has a vision. All people and the planet thrive when the environment is free of hazardous chemicals. Their mission is to advance human and environmental health by improving hazardous chemical transparency and inspiring product innovation. They pursue their mission on three fronts. 1. Research and policy, uncovering cutting-edge information about healthier products and health impacts. 2. Data systems, producing software platforms that aggregate and catalog product transparency and chemical hazards. And 3. Education and capacity building, fostering others' capabilities to make informed decisions. When we know better, we do better. To learn more about Healthy Building Network and access their suite of resources, visit www.healthybuilding.net. That's www.healthybuilding.net. Now enjoy the rest of the episode.
Welcome to the Building Science Podcast.
Welcome to this. Okay. Welcome to the
Building Science
To the Building Science
Podcast.
Welcome to the Building Science Podcast.
Bringing the human factor to architecture and design.
Brought to you by Positive Energy in Austin, Texas.
Okay, hello and welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to the Building Science Podcast. I'm here, as always, with my trusty sidekick, Miguel.
Hello, everyone.
He's so profound. He always knows what to say. I'm here with Kyle and Connor Fagin, and we are going to talk about a Passivhaus project in Dallas and some of the data collection that has come from that. So we'll start with you, Kyle. Please introduce yourself. A little bit of background.
My name's Kyle Fagin. I was a commercial developer for a while and got into home building. We started to see if we could do some things to homes, spec homes, to make them more efficient and make the numbers work. And that led into Connor joining me, and we built the first international passive house in the state of Texas.
Right, and in Dallas, Texas.
In Dallas, Texas.
And so, Connor, quick introduction. Who are you, and
Yes.
why are you here?
Yeah, so I'm Connor Fagin. I'm kind of our resident millennial with all the monitoring and stuff like that. But yeah, the Passivhaus has been a really interesting, project, and we've learned a lot from it. Stuff that we'll carry forward to future projects, whether they're passive or not. So it's just kind of a different way of doing things.
How did you first get the idea to do a passive house here in Dallas?
A friend of mine sent me an article on passive houses, and I didn't know what a passive house was, but I read the article and I thought, wow, that's awesome. And I said, I need to do that. And I sent the article to Connor, and he had the same feeling about it that I did, and one thing led to another, and here we are.
Do you remember what article it was? Was it the one in the New York Times? Or
I don't even remember.
And do you remember
that
what was awesome? Like, what was awesome about it for you? It was energy deep energy cut.
The deep energy cuts, just the benefits of living in a house like that, the benefits for the people living in it, obviously the benefits to the environment. I just thought that got me a lot more charged than just building a house.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the thing that initially kind of got my attention as far as passive is concerned is especially living in Texas, it's a cooling dominated climate. We're very, very intimate with our air conditioners here. It's something that we you notice when it kicks on and off, and just to think that there's a different way of doing things that's more efficient. It's going to cost you less money in the end, and it's more comfortable. It's more of a passive system where it's not something that you notice that it turns on and off. It's just a different way of doing things. It's more fluid, and it just seems like a smarter way to go about it.
Good. So you picked that up from this article. So here's to the power of the Fifth Estate, the press. Yeah, so it's interesting. I've been associated with Passivhaus for years now, probably not crazy number of years, like 2011 or something was my first conference. And I'm getting it, quote unquote, getting it more and more. And where I'm at now is passive in the sense of the components of the house that mainly just sit there. They're passive, they're durable. You decide what you're going to do, and you do it, and you want it to be done forever. So the enclosure, right, the windows, the air distribution system, not the active boxes, but the other piece of Passivhaus that's coming now is just the quality, right? Quality design matters. We live in a world where there's tremendous sophistication offered to us every day, and yet not so much for houses, right? For you as a developer, excuse me, I hope this doesn't sound like I'm poking you in the eye, right? I would bet that was an economic series of transactions, and a lot of the decisions, Kyle, had an economic basis.
Yeah, some bigger ones, actually.
What do you mean by that?
Just in amounts of money that it takes to do those projects, time it takes to do them, you know.
So there's a lot of schedule and budget. That's what you're paying attention to.
Yeah, and not a lot of freedom to get creative. I think even less of a want or need in that arena for the types of things we're doing with high-performance homes or a passive house.
We didn't mean to make this episode about developers, but I'm interested to know, when you were doing those developments, were there conversations along the lines of, well, if we do this, the building won't last as long, or the air quality won't be as good, or the tenant will have high bills? Were those conversations woven in?
No, I think it was a little more of, this is just kind of how it's done, and this is the way we do it, and this is how we make the numbers work. And there weren't a lot of construction decisions other than maybe materials, that type of thing.
I mean, did you guys ever even mention air quality or indoor air quality?
Yeah.
Not on the radar?
It was foreign to me at that point in time.
And when you're evaluating projects of that scale, I mean, you're dealing with an Excel spreadsheet. It's not looking at the different equipment options and figuring out what would work best for the house or what you're trying to accomplish. It's a numbers game. So I'm just trying to make the numbers work.
Yeah, it's not like on Austin Powers, Dr. Evil.
Look what you did to Mr. Bigglesworth!
Right? It's not like you're doing that. It's just there's this swing and a miss in the sense that I'm not even realizing that I'm making durability decisions today. I didn't even notice I was making an air quality decision today. Or an energy use decision, which is quite profound.
And since they were really just building the shells, and then the tenants or new owners would finish it out, for their own purposes. Really, it's interesting because you even verbalized that most of what you dealt with and what you guys dealt with was the enclosure, because that's what you were responsible for providing.
Right.
And the finish out from there. It's so, it's a different way of looking at it.
That's funny. You were responsible for the enclosure, but you weren't really relating to it as a functional element.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, this is just what's done. Yeah, I think that's so important. What a great place to start this episode, right? That here we have across the country professionals involved in the act of delivering conditioned space to us, to society in some sense. And yet they really, they're good people, hardworking people, caring people that don't even realize I'm just going to say it, they're not really on their game.
It's not on their radar.
They don't know what they don't know. The unknown unknowns.
I mean, and I don't think that's just on the commercial side either. I mean, I think whether you're building, a home with, you're a homeowner building with a custom builder, or you're a builder, that's just builds specs, I mean, it really doesn't matter. I mean, until you kind of start thinking about these things differently and how they all work together, and just make it not just about the numbers, you're just going to be doing what everyone else is doing, So
you set out to build this passive house here in Dallas, and you started by finding an architect here? Or how did it work? How did it go?
We had a hard time finding an architect here. We didn't know any of you guys that we've met along the way now, in the Austin area. We ended up using some architects from Manhattan.
From Manhattan?
Yep. They were certified international passive house architects.
So PHI.
PHI.
And you met them, how'd you get in touch with them?
Just kind of a random thing that happened. I used to live in Connecticut. I was on the New Canaan Historical Society email list. I saw that Bill Ryle of Ryle Sheridan Architects was speaking at a New Canaan Historical Society function about and he was Passivhaus certified, and he was talking about mid-century homes, and I thought, I need to call that guy. So I called him. He called me back. Didn't know me from Adam, and next thing I knew, Connor and I went up to New York to meet him, and we ended up hiring him. Yeah.
Well, good for you guys, and good for him, right? There really is this sort of insiders on the Passivhaus,
Yeah.
and hopefully it'll become the norm. So you worked with him back and forth then remotely over some months.
Yeah, Bill wasn't real active with ours. Ted Sheridan was kind of the lead on it, and Will Robinette was the one we dealt with more on a day-to-day basis, and they came down a couple times during construction.
So they stayed during construction administration? Or?
They came down a couple times, and we talked very often. We had never done this before, and so we were pretty focused on this project.
Mm-hmm. So you guys decided to make a deeper commitment to quality, and you got a design at this point now, and it has a lot of continuous insulation. It's got some details that are new. It's got an ERV, and then you go try to hire people. Was that just a piece of cake?
It was not. It was not. Go ahead.
Well, it was a little hard because, one, we had no historicals for building any, a house like this. So, most of the numbers that we had from previous projects couldn't be applied. And then, while we're trying to control the costs on one side, we're also trying to make sure that, the mechanical contractor that we're talking to is going to be able to install, this Mitsubishi system that, now that we've installed it, it's plug and play. It's a lot simpler than, traditional forced air setup, but a lot of these guys that we would talk to, they'd say, so, is this for an office? And we're like, no, it's for a home. And they're like, well, we've never done that in a home, So it was, trying to control costs on a number of things, whether it's insulation. I mean, the amount of insulation that went into this house is crazy. But at the end of the day, comparing, that to what we were paying for insulation before, it really wasn't all that much more, especially for the value that you get out of it, know? So, it was hard, one, without historicals to control the cost, but then two, making sure that we could find someone who could perform the work and could perform the work the way that we knew it needed to be done.
Yeah.
So, and we lost some of our subs along the way. We had to find some new ones for different things. We had to source materials and equipment that we had never sourced before. Mm-hmm. So the whole design phase and just even getting ready to break ground took an extended time.
Yeah. So when you were interviewing subs, and would you tell them it was a Passivhaus?
We did, and we tried to tell them.
They would say, and that's what? What is that?
Yeah, they didn't. Yeah. They didn't really know, and we'd have to say, we'd have to do things differently, sometimes out of sequence, kind of above and beyond probably what you've done before. And
that's a good way to get real low bid, huh?
Yeah. We got some crazy.
It's going to be hard. It's going to take you longer, and you're not going to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we're figuring out some of this along the way as well. So it was interesting. Our framer calls it our Europa house. And he just, I guess because it's from Europe originally. And he's like, are you going to build any more of these Europa houses? And I'm like, I don't know. Are you going to frame them if I do?
How does he answer that? What does he say?
He's not really communicating a lot with us now, so I don't know.
I mean, the reality is, though, he made more money than he would have off framing, that Passivhaus than he would a comparable amount of square footage. I mean, we paid him a premium for the work. So, while there was a learning curve to it, towards the end, I mean, these crews that we were working with, it only took us kind of explaining what needed to be done on a small portion of the wall for them to really get to work and start cranking it out, So while there was more labor involved, the materials cost is more on our side. We were expecting that. We know what the tape's going to cost. We know what the insulation's going to cost, sheathing, you name it. But yeah, I mean, it theoretically is more profitable for someone like a framer, It's more billable labor hours, and, at the end of the day, you end up with a better product, And I don't know about him, but I'd rather, warranty something that's that well put together, compared to something that's barely meeting code, that's just the bare minimum that you have to do. I mean, so if it's, potentially more profitable for the trades and easier to warranty, less headaches, makes sense to me.
We did talk about this a little bit, but, some of the guys, frankly, even through the vetting process, once they're on the job, they just didn't have a great attitude. But it was interesting in at least 2 or 3 different situations as we explained to them why they were having to do what we were asking them to do, or, and that this house would be a house that had next to no utility bills, then the light kind of came on for them, and it's like, they're like, whoa, okay. And it's like they saw a reason to the madness, and it was really cool to see how then they sort of came on board with what we were trying to do.
Yeah.
And what was interesting,
they need a sense of meaning. Why am I doing this?
Yeah. One thing that was interesting too that I at least haven't seen, I don't know about you, but we had subs that would call us after the house was completed and be like, how's it doing? What are the bills like? Did you accomplish your goal? Yeah, and our guys that did our air sealing, that was half the framing crew, half the insulation crew.
I was going to ask you about that.
Both of them, even though, we had a little bit of trouble getting the framer started, both of them called us and they said, where'd you come in on your blower door? They cared. They understood the reason for it. They put the time and the effort into it, and they wanted to make sure that they, done a good job for us. So I thought that was interesting.
They don't realize it, but it's going to be a bragging right for them
exactly.
at some point.
Yeah, and so you did your air control layer, and there's a lot of continuous insulation outside of that. And there's cellulose in the wall. We've talked about that. So what was your sheathing? Was it zip sheathing?
Yeah, we just used zip, and we taped it with our Tescon Vanna tape. So pretty much going from...
You didn't use the zip tape?
We did not use the zip tape. So
was there a reason for that?
The Tescon, we know that it's vapor permeable. We figured just for uniformity,
that's
go
awesome.
ahead and use that. I mean, there is an increased cost. What does that stuff roll?
$36 a roll.
It's expensive for tape.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, I mean, you get that tape on your fingernails, it's on there for a month. It does not come off. So I don't know about zip tape, but I mean, this stuff is really sticky, gummy. It's a good product. It's a great product.
Yeah, they might both be acrylic, and they might both be pressure sensitive. But yeah, the good tape, Siga Wiglove is another one. And so you were giving rolls of $36 rolls of tape out to people who were using it for the first time. Were you also explaining to them, this is a $36 roll of tape?
Yeah. I mean, we would place like $1,000 tape orders, and it was crazy. It was crazy.
Well, between that and the Intello, it was... But we were.
So that was your vapor control layer was Intello.
We taped the Intello, we taped the zip, we taped the polystyrene on the outside. Of course, taped the windows. We used the same thing for the air barrier in the windows, and we used a lot of that Tescon Vanna tape.
Yeah,
it was our friend. So.
Wow. Okay, and you mentioned insulation. What is the R value of a wall in your house?
I think the walls are R36, and I believe the ceiling is R48.
I think that's right. Yeah.
That sounds good.
Yeah, and then
so
we've got
crazy over the top high.
It's really not, and our climate zone really doesn't dictate that we have to have just insane amounts of insulation.
No, the temperature differences here are not.
Exactly, and one difference too is people are used to typically putting on a dark roof. Most composition shingle roofs are gray or black, sometimes black. But we ended up using TPO, and that's just white. It's reflective. It's a clean looking product, and it was funny because playing around with the PHPP model, he was showing me the difference if we went with a black TPO. This is the value if we went with a white, and it was far and away less heat gain, more reflectivity, exact same product, no increased cost. And the roof on this one's just not super visible, so it really didn't matter whether we did black or white at the end of the day. So
well, it did for energy use, but
from an aesthetic standpoint,
you're right. And I've been associated with projects where there's some woofy models, hydrothermal models, showing that in fact if there are moisture issues, the black roof is preferential. Black roof will absorb more heat and cause the moisture to go into vapor form. So it's interesting. It's not always that the light roof is the best, but just it depends. It's like retrofit situations. TPO. There's a lot of continuous insulation under it. Is that right?
Yes.
Is there any?
We have an 1.5 inches under the TPO.
And then it's cavity inside. What do you have?
12 inches of blown cellulose in the.
It's netted or bagged up.
It was netted with Intello.
Oh.
Yeah, so the Intello, which is our air barrier, acts as the netting, and then we dense pack the cellulose and all the, between the joists and the wall cavities. So, while you would typically have to put up netting for, the cellulose, that kind of did both jobs for us.
Yeah. There's many ways to do that, but I've heard of that one. So you got your framing crew and your installation crew working together. The roofer didn't need anything different. It was all normal when he got there or she got there. Yep. Okay, so let's talk about systems in this house. So you mentioned you have a Mitsubishi VRF system. How many air handlers?
So we have 3 zones throughout the house. We have one zone for, the main downstairs area, kitchen, living room, that sort of thing. The master's also downstairs, and that's on its own separate zone. And the master and the upstairs zone are on a shared condenser.
Okay.
So
2 condensers, 3 zones. 2
condensers, 3 zones. The master upstairs are shared, and then the downstairs common areas is a 1-to-1. So those are all Mitsubishi's Slimline. What were those?
Compact ducted?
Yeah, compact ducted. And, aside from the fact that you can pretty much put them anywhere, they're just so, thin and small that you can, wherever you have room, it's easy to plan for them, I guess, is really what it goes down to.
They're like 8 inches tall and 30 by 30, something like that.
Exactly. So, that made it pretty easy in the end. I mean, we went with metal duct.
In the end, let's explore that.
In the end, once we found someone to put them in for us that we were confident, do a good job for us, it was fine.
Okay, so let's explore that. Once we found it, what was it like finding an installer?
Well, it was difficult because a lot of these guys don't break down what the, equipment cost versus the labor and install cost is going to be. Some wanted to use different ducting than others, and at that point we had a rough mechanical layout, but we didn't have an exact plan to send to these guys and say, hey, here's exactly what we want. Here's the exact linear feet of ducting that we need, here's where it's going. It wasn't quite like that. And we also were trying to find someone that could do both the Mitsubishi systems for us, ended up finding a great guy in the end, but that could also install, test and balance and everything, the ERV. Those Zender ERVs have lots of settings on them, lots of different ways that, they could be installed, but there was one specific way that we needed to do it,
The English instructions were very short.
That was the other thing is, this controller is the most antiquated thing I've seen, especially for the price point, for this to be one of the best ERVs on the market, if not the best. It was interesting because I found myself having to go to the German instructions and just trying to figure out and look at the logos and symbols and kind of just visually read through it because the German instructions were twice as long as the English ones. So a lot of the information that the German instructions had weren't in our language, there was no resource to get that. I was literally on Google Translate for some of it. So
oh my gosh.
We've talked to them about that since, and they're like, we're coming up with an English one, don't worry, you only have to do this once. But that being said, it was a tricky deal. It really was. Whether you're talking about the initial install, making sure that we had the right, airflow rates for each room. Passivhaus, I'm not, super familiar with U.S. Passive, but international, they have airflow CFM requirements for each portion of the house. Same with Fiat, yeah. So, it was important that we get the number of returns to each room that were supposed to be there. Same thing with the supplies.
We should clarify for the audience, this is a whole house ERV.
Whole home ERV, exactly. It's a Zender Comfo Air 350. I believe there are 15 supplies and 15 returns. But yeah, it's a whole home system. We've got MERV 8 filters in there, so whether it's pulling fresh air in from the outside, or pulling stale air in from the house, it runs it through those filters. So
So it's literally the lungs of the home.
It's the lungs of the home.
And it interfaces with the lungs of the home occupant.
Exactly.
It's a and there's boost mode for the bathroom vents.
Yeah, so rather than having a traditional, ventilation vent fan in the bathroom, there's a button that cranks it up to 100% capacity for a defined period of time. Right now we have it set at, I think, about 90% capacity for boost for 30 minutes. But it really just takes the place of a ventilation fan. And, it's not just for the water closets. That could be, for the kitchen. There's a boost, button in the kitchen that if you're cooking, you can click that and it helps get rid of some of those, cooking emissions, that sort of thing. So
yeah, I want to talk about that when we get to the data point, the data part of this interview. What did you do for domestic hot water?
Domestic hot water, we have Navian 200,000 BTU tankless gas heater with a recirc loop.
Built-in recirc
loop. We made that as short as we could, but at the end of the day, our architects were really good about making the plumbing footprint as compact as possible. So really, our plumbing cost on this house was lower than some of these other houses that we've done, just because it was well thought out.
Nice. That's an important one to hear.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump back to the other fluid we were talking about, air, and there is a humidity control system in the house, right?
Yeah, so we have a Ultra Air MD33, just standalone wall dehumidifier. I believe it's 70 pints per day, and I can't remember off the top of my head how many kilowatts it is per pint, but it's really efficient. It's up there with.
I think it's a little lower on pints.
Is it a little lower on pints?
Maybe 35 pints a day. But
and those are also rated at...
Yeah, I have one in my house too, and I've measured it, and it does exceed what it says in the literature in terms of capacity and what it actually pulls out. But I think for safety's sake, we can call it 30 to 35.
35 to 40, maybe higher.
Yeah.
And it uses, you're right, it uses very little energy.
Mm-hmm. And what's been interesting too is, we worked with Zender, the maker of the ERV, on putting temperature and humidity wireless sensors in all the returns for the house on the heating and cooling side. Cool. And all the supplies. We've got sensors on the fresh air intake to know what the incoming temperature and humidity is. We've got it on the exhaust to see what we're exhausting out of the house. We've got it on all the plenums around the core within the ERV. So we can at any time look and see how the house is performing, exactly what the conditions are, and if something like the ERV were to need the filters changed or something like that, you can tell from those temperature and humidity readings if it's doing what it needs to be doing. So
I want to go to the data side and energy monitoring, but before we go let's stay on this more soft side, the market transformation piece. So this is not just a passive house in Dallas. This is a passive house that's also a spec house. In Dallas. And any comments on how the process has been going with the realtor? Do you feel like your realtor gets it? Let's just start with that one. I mean, gets it, you know what I mean by gets it. Yeah.
We do feel like our realtor gets it. They have worked very hard to understand the ins and outs of a passive house, and they can communicate that to other brokers, potential buyers. Yeah, we've been super pleased with that. The thing that has been a little bit frustrating is that we just thought that naturally this was going to be the next greatest thing since sliced bread. It was going to fly off the shelf, and that hadn't happened.
Yeah.
And so it's been a little bit trying. One of our goals and passions is that more people would know about passive houses. I mean, if you pull 10 people off the street, probably about 10 people aren't going to know what passive is. And so, for more people to know that it's out there, it's available, the benefits of it for architects, for builders, because these homes are within reach for people, and they're a much better home in so many different ways. So we just we're doing what we can to get the word out, you know.
Yeah.
And,
You know, another thing that's been tricky too is, you know, at the end of the day, in our market, there are no comparisons for this house. You know, you can't just look at the house and say, oh, you know, the cost per foot's, you know, X, that fits in with the neighborhood or doesn't. It's not about that, you know. It's trying to convey to potential buyers the health benefits of the passive house, explaining at the same time how it works and how all these systems work together. You know, explaining things like, you know, the heating and cooling truly in this house only raise and lower the temperature. They're not required because we have separately ducted systems for air circulation, filtration, and ventilation. You know, you have to explain to people how these systems all work together, and that really the HVAC system, if you will, in this house is, you know, a 3-part system that all kind of work in tandem together to, you know, keep the house, you know, stable and ideal as possible. So, you know, while we're trying to convey the value to people, explain why, you know, they should be willing to pay a little bit more per foot because the carrying cost is vastly lower. You know, it's a tricky deal. And, you know, from our standpoint, to be quite honest, you know, we're looking at, you know, we're comparing our listing to the rest of the neighborhood, slowly lowering the price, trying to decide for ourselves, you know, since we're the first people that have done this, how much does it make sense to drop the price at this next reduction, you know? How quickly do we want to bring ourselves, quote unquote, in line with the market where we know we can get the thing sold, you know? Mm-hmm. So, you know, for us, it's kind of a cost-benefit analysis of, you know, it might be worth keeping the house on the market a little longer than we would with some of these other houses to try to establish that comparison that we would need moving forward to, you know, sell these houses further.
Yeah, you're truly pioneers in that sense.
Yeah, you know, and the energy savings are a little bit easier to quantify, obviously. I mean, you can look at the total cost of ownership over time with the reduced bills and the small increment in a mortgage. But then when you talk about the comfort, how do you put a dollar figure on that? When you talk about the increased air quality and how that can benefit your whole family, you know, especially if you have allergies or asthma or other breathing disorders, how do you put a price tag on that? So, you know, once people understand them, I think it's a little bit easier for them to see, you know, why it would be worth paying a little bit more for this. But if they just look at it on MLS and they see the square footage and they see the price and they don't really understand what it is that they would be getting if they bought the house, they're probably just going to go on to the next house, you know?
Yeah, I mean, preaching to the choir, Miguel and I both work for Positive Energy, and we do mechanical designs, and air quality and thermal comfort are invisible. Yeah. Spend more money on this invisible thing. One thing that I know that I wish you could do, I'm thinking of, is I wish you could say to a prospective buyer, come spend a few days in this house, spend the night in this house. You know, like maybe your next one could be like a passive Airbnb duplex or something, because, you know, we go through life led by our neocortical based decisions, but really those neocortical decisions are trying to give us a good, you know, a happy life or a pleasant life, and that's a felt sense. I'm having a good day. That felt sense is what Passive House impacts, right? You're immersed in a quiet, thermally stable, clean air environment, and you know, you go in there, you stay in there, you feel it. You start to feel it.
Yeah, we spent some time, just for the audience's sake, we spent some time in this house yesterday. It was extremely comfortable. It's beautiful design. There is truly a felt sense in that space that you can't get from any other average house on the market.
Yeah, but you drive your car through a neighborhood, and what do you see? House. One of them was a passive house. And yet there's no striking market differentiator, you know. It's not like
no glow.
Oh, is that the angels singing? Is that like what can we do? You know, we gotta. That's the podcast, you know, education and advocacy, and go talk to your local HBA, go talk to your local appraisers group, go talk to your local realtors group, and explain. Not all houses are the same. There's dimensions of quality. You know, you guys pick certain cars and certain electronic components. Same thing with homes. There's so much more than just how big is it and what what's the countertop made of, and yeah, that's why I mentioned the realtor. I mean, I don't want to single that part of the ecosystem out that helps deliver houses to people, but I have worked with a lot of real estate agents over the years doing spec homes, and there's staging it, and then there's the counters and the colors, and they are rightfully representing what the buyers tell them matter. So I guess they're really not the ones that source that, but they're representing it, and that's like, that doesn't matter, It does matter because it does matter.
From the get-go, we've known that aesthetics are going to be important for this one. So really our goal before we even sat down with the architects initially was, to make this house as, unassuming as possible. We do not want you to be able to drive up to this house or walk through this house and tell that there's something drastically different about it. We don't want people to be able to see the things, the components that make the house as efficient as it is, and really set it apart from the other new construction houses in the neighborhood. So that was something that...
Oh, come on, I want you to walk them out to those outdoor units and turn them on and say, this is how quiet this is.
Do you hear how quiet this is?
And that quality pervades this mechanical system.
It's interesting. I just to add one more thing. I think the thing that we thought would make this house stand apart and would attract people was that it was passive, and that it's comfortable, and that it's quiet, and that it's healthy, and that it's durable, and the utility bills are going to be very, very low. But I think the fact that it was the first passive and it was all these things, I think that might have actually, and maybe still, continued to kind of scare some people off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but it's not the first passive house. It's just the first one in Dallas.
It's the first one around here, but it's that it's new and it's different, and it's the first one here. And
first can be a bit of a double-sided or double-edged sword.
So instead of it being greatness, it's like, oh no,
What do they not know?
Yeah. And here's the other thing too, is especially in our market, there's a huge jump from what someone expects and sees on the market today in a home that is efficient per se. In other parts of even Texas, down in Austin, you have homes that aren't necessarily passive or have some sort of certification or stamp on them, but that's something that the market is more used to seeing is, small improvements like mechanicals, for instance, that will, reduce the operating costs of the home, make it run, better overall, be healthier, etc. But for our market, from what we've seen, it's people want larger homes. They, want them to do exactly what they expect them to do, right? So it's not even really, I think, the fact that it's passive or the first or anything like that. I think it could even more be attributable to the fact that efficiency is not something that is prevalent in our market. And
so it's a cultural shift.
It's a cultural shift, and especially selling something on its efficiency is not something that, in Dallas, it's all about the bling and, big homes, like you were saying on a previous podcast, just feeling secure in your investment, it's one of those things. It's more of an ego sort of purchase rather than, this house might make more sense than the next option,
And,
it's not rational, it's emotional.
Exactly.
Practically every builder today builds green. Okay, so you define that,
the greenwashing.
So what makes this house that much greener than this greenhouse, So that can be a little frustrating too.
One thing that's been interesting too is where this, Lively project is in, a specific neighborhood.
So that's the name of the street, Lively?
Yeah, it's a Lively Circle. It's off of Lively Lane. It's in Midway Hollow in Dallas. But what's been interesting to see is before, new house, Ansax tile, yada yada, big backyard, outdoor entertaining area. Since we've listed this house, all of a sudden, all these new houses have green features all of a sudden. And they'll mention the SEER that, AC setup. That's not something that was on any listing description before. So
thank you for doing that.
Well, it's just been interesting to see how it's kind of changed all the other listings, and it's kind of already started to refocus that a bit, to where we think things ultimately need to go.
Yeah. So the buyers that want the bling, they're associating bling with quality and quality that they appreciate. And I think, just waking them up to the fact, if you say, do you want your house to be durable? Do you want it to be comfortable? Do you want it to be efficient? They do want those things. they're just not yet maybe trafficking in that value preference system space.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing as people who go to Whole Foods to get organic groceries.
There's Whole Foods here, right?
There are certainly that value preference system exists, but it has not realized its kind of full scope yet.
Yeah, you should say it's like the Whole Foods of houses.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well,
or the Tesla of houses.
I'd like to get a little more crunchy because I know you guys did put a lot of work into actually monitoring how the house is performing. So if you really want to set yourself apart as green builders, let's hear what you did.
So what did you monitor? You monitored electricity?
So yeah, we have an energy monitor to monitor electricity usage, and that's aggregate data that has device detection, so it's not circuit by circuit monitoring, but it essentially accomplishes the same thing.
And
it's called Sense. Yeah, it's a Sense Energy Monitor, SENSE. And then for water monitoring, we have a device called Flow, and it's FLO. It's made by Flow Technologies out of California. And we actually started out as a beta test home with this company. They were a semi-young startup, reached out to them, kind of told them the premise of the house, what we were expecting to accomplish with it. And whether it was monitoring or, things like our countertops, even Dow Tile pitched in, Mitsubishi, pitched some, gave us, worked with us on some of the equipment costs. People want to be involved with these projects, these sorts of projects. We love Dow Tile, but at the end of the day, Dow Tile is the #1 air polluter in the DFW Metroplex. Wow. And so, to see a company and industry like that wanting to get involved and make a difference and kind of start to go a different direction. That's been really fun to watch,
Yeah.
But back to the monitoring. So,
you worked with Sense?
So we worked with Sense. We worked with Flow Technologies. We originally started out with a beta testing water monitor, a beta monitor that they hadn't released to the public. They're on the market, sold out. They're doing really well. And we have, I think, the third version, so the second one after, since it's been brought to market. And it works great. I mean, whether you're talking about energy, monitoring or water monitoring, the water monitor can recognize individual fixtures. In this house we have one single kind of toilet. It's just a Kohler Cimarron. It's all about the usage signature. Whether you're talking electricity or water, it can tell by the flow rates on the water side, what fixture is running. Again, it can tell the difference between the kitchen sink faucet and the bathroom faucets that are mostly the same throughout the house. Mm-hmm. The Kohler toilets are the exact same throughout the house, so that was an easy one to recognize. And it really just looks at the usage patterns. So what's interesting, though, is, for instance, here's just one scenario. Let's say you run the dishwasher, right? So you start it, the pump runs, the Sense picks that up and says, oh, I recognize that pump, that's the dishwasher starting. And then, it finishes the pumping the old water out, and it starts pulling water, in for the wash cycle, and the flow will pick that part up. So really, you get the full picture. You can see how much energy went into a given load of dishes, or how much, it cost you last year to run your dishwasher. Maybe you need to stop running at half full sort of thing. It'll help you clue into those sorts of things. But by monitoring the water and the electricity, it really gives you the full picture on a number of things. It's really interesting.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So do you know how much a typical dishwasher load runs?
Typical dishwasher load, I mean, we put in, Energy Star appliances in this house. The water usage is very low. It really depends on the cycle. It can range from as, little as maybe like 3 to 4 gallons for a quick rinse or a quick wash cycle to, heavy in pots and pans. I mean, that can use about 10 gallons. And then, depending on which run cycle you're using, if it heats the water and you have like a heated dry, that'll add some to the, electricity usage for that cycle. But overall, I'm a little relieved just because it doesn't, in the end, use quite as much as I was expecting it to. But those are insights that without these technologies we wouldn't have.
Yeah. What's been your biggest user?
Biggest user has probably been...
Talking about water or electricity?
Well, it's interesting. It's hard to say what the biggest user is because comparing some things doesn't make sense. Sure. And a good example of that is, the main air conditioner zone downstairs. If I have that set 2 degrees below, the ambient temperature in the room, so we have the 2+ degree differential, that thing's going to turn on and run more like a traditional forced air setup at full capacity. It depends on how much ground it has to make up. So let's just say we crank it down even 3 degrees. The max, consumption for that, individual zone is probably about 1,800 watts. But then where it starts to get a little tricky is if I go over to the sink and I run the disposal, that uses about 1,500 watts. So it's about consumption and the amount that it's pulling while it's running, but the duration is important too. And that's something that on the HVAC side is important about the Mitsubishi equipment and why it really is different in that it can vary the amount that it has to draw to change the temperature and either draw it out over a longer period of time at lower usage levels or go ahead and get the thing cooled down and turn off completely. So really it depends on the needs of the house at the time. So
have you ever compared a conventional system to Mitsubishi?
So I actually have, and it kind of just worked out that we've built a number of homes on this one block in Midway Hollow, and so
interesting.
Yeah, and they're about the same size. They're obviously the houses we were building before were built closer to code, whereas the Passivhaus is way far beyond that. But it's been interesting because, we put energy monitors on each of those homes. We were, when I came to work with Kyle, he was already putting solar on every house he built. He was already putting rainwater harvesting systems on every house he built, tankless water heaters. So really,
Kyle, you're awesome.
Yeah, he's doing awesome.
But there's no solar currently on this home.
No solar currently on this home because we can't take the federal tax credit. Only the homeowner can. But we have it pre-wired, which a lot of times.
And then they will have no energy bill.
Yeah, we have 2 systems designed for the house. One will meet 100% of its theoretical, consumption in a given month or a year. The other is way above that. For about a, $8,000 additional investment on the solar, you won't pay an electric bill. You'll get a check back every single month, and I think there's real value in that.
Do you remember how many kW would be in those arrays?
I think 4.2 would cover about 100%. Yeah, make it about net zero.
Annual net zero. Mm-hmm.
Annual net zero. And then the second system we have designed, I think, is 9.4 kilowatts.
Yeah, I think that's
and again, it's an $8,000 incremental investment, but that not only are you getting a check back, you don't have to factor in that portion of your utilities.
And this kind of buyer would probably be amenable to it anyway.
I'll put it to you this way. Everyone that we've talked to that has seriously considered the home has gone for the larger system.
Wow.
That's good to know.
But again, since it's pre-wired, really, you install the panels, install the, hook it in. We already have it ready to go. It's already essentially wired into the breaker box. You just put the inverter on the house, put the panels on the house, and you're done.
Has the energy monitoring been a sales tool in terms of people coming in, seeing the home, how little it actually uses, and then it's a very easy, logical conclusion to say, well, I know this upsell is going to make me a return over X number of years, right?
It's been really interesting because on this Passivhaus, we've connected everything that we can possibly connect. We've got the water heater, the dimmers, or Wi-Fi dimmers. You can control the irrigation system that's drip, by the way. It's a drip irrigation system.
Wait, the whole yard is drip irrigation?
The entire yard. We put, I think, 3.5 miles of drip tube in this house.
That's great.
Let's exorbitant carbon footprint of that. But
yeah.
It's amazing the water evaporation that you're not going to have. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and I don't know how it works in the rest of the state or the U.S., but in Dallas at least, because you have rainwater harvesting systems and drip irrigation, you're not subject until a level 5 water conservation alert. You can water any time of day, as much or as frequently as you want. You're not subject to water restrictions until it is an extreme level of drought. And it's amazing. And a lot of people too that don't have a separate irrigation water meter for their sprinkler, all that usage, all that water that they're throwing on their yard is factoring into their sewage charge at the end of the month.
Yeah.
And the sewage charge is more often than not more expensive than the clean water coming into the house, because the cost of treatment is insanely high.
Yeah, and that's the gift that keeps on giving too, because they'll set your black water charge and keep it that way for a whole year.
Exactly.
And that's particularly poignant for us in Austin because we just came off of a water boil mandate in the city because the flooding that was caused in Central Texas essentially wiped out our filtration system's capacity. And the city could produce 105 gallons a day, and we were consuming 120 gallons, something like that.
Wow.
Or million.
Million, I was going to say, there's a multiplier on that.
Yeah.
So yeah, as far as using the energy monitoring as a sales tool, it's been really interesting. I think it appeals to people for a number of reasons. On the energy side, there's a lot of information that a homeowner can glean from access to this sort of data. I had one of our homeowners reach out to me just last week, and he asked me. He said, "Hey, my pool pumps are using $30 to $40 more electricity than they used last month. Why do you think that is?" So, remotely I was able to tell him, if it's probably just a more restricted flow through your filter. I said, "What is your, filter pressure?" Turns out you need to clean this filter. It's back down to where it needs to be. So there are incredible opportunities. You can even see if you're out of town and that no one's in the house, and you see banks of lights starting flipping on. Someone's in your house. So you can make security tools out of that. There are a lot of different things that these insights can give you.
One make the invisible visible.
Exactly. But what's funny is, since we have all these connected features in the house, we're including an iPad with this one. And on the iPad, during showings, I'll leave, the thing on, just leave the screen on the energy monitor. And what's been funny is as people realize that things that they do in the house will, make this energy monitor cause changes on it, they'll walk around and they'll go and, turn the microwave on to see how much it's going to cost them to microwave their dinner for 2 minutes, frozen dinner. They'll go around flipping banks of lights on and off. They'll go and mess with the air conditioner. And it's just funny to see these people intrigued by this information, and considering the cost of installing this type of monitoring, again, since it's not circuit by circuit monitoring, it's really inexpensive to put in, and quite frankly, anyone can put it in, as long as to turn the entire breaker box off before you do it. It's really not hard. Another thing, as far as the water monitoring is concerned, when we first started working with this company, their business model was a lower cost on the front end with a monthly subscription or yearly subscription cost. And it wasn't high, but it's something that, especially with early adopters, they might not want to shell out for every year. So we ended up working with, and one of the important features, it doesn't just monitor which fixtures have been running, where your total water usage went. The most the coolest feature in my mind is the ability to turn the water off to the house at any time. If this flow monitor sees a usage signature or pattern that it does not recognize, or that is over certain thresholds, over 5 gallons a minute for a 10-minute period of time, 7.5 gallons a minute for 5 minutes. It's got these different and it'll send you an alert. It'll send you an alert on your phone as a push notification. It can text you, and they will also call you. And depending on the situation, the rate of flow, and how out of how much is deviating from the normal, it'll either turn the water off and ask you if you want to turn the water back on, or they'll call you and say, "Hey, we think something's going on. Do you want to turn the water off?" So it's not something that you're going to go have 3 people showering at once and it's going to trip it and cut the water off to your house. It's an intelligent system. It's just a matter of how you want to go about these things.
That's huge.
It's huge. I mean, just picture yourself, you're in Colorado over Christmas skiing. We get a cold snap here in Dallas, and and of course it's going to be a lot harder for the pipes in the Passivhaus to freeze than traditional home. But the beauty of that is, if you see that cold snap and no one's at your house, you can turn the water off to your house. You don't have to worry about it leaking or freezing or anything like that. So we've been working.
And then the water damage claim that you don't have.
Yeah. Exactly. So what we actually did was I reached out to a number of the large insurance carriers, AIG, Chubb, State Farm.
You personally?
Yeah, I worked with them on doing this. Reached out to these carriers, and we had them create a discount for the flow. It is exactly what they give you for a monitored alarm system. So it's $150 a year off of your homeowners. So, with someone who doesn't have any water monitoring, you can pay it can pay for itself in 2-3 years, including the install.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it's a neat deal, and now they've totally changed their business model where they say if you give them the ability to turn the water off at their will rather than them alerting you each time, if your house floods, they will pay your deductible.
No way.
Yeah, so not only did we have them create a discount, we've come up with this program where they're taking some responsibility. They're confident in this product, and based on my experience with it, I won't own a home that doesn't have it.
Because they're just trying to mitigate risk.
They're just trying to mitigate risk, and at the end of the day, water damage can be really costly, and it's one of those things that you can clean it up. But if your house, you're out of town away on business for a month, and you have a leak day 1 or 2, even once you clean that up, you're going to have lasting effects, and so they know this. I think it's a really, really neat tool. So it, on both sides, energy.
Is there another shutoff? Out by the street?
So there's a shutoff at the meter. There's a shutoff between the meter and the flow, and then the flow acts as an additional. It's really a secondary shutoff for the house. So to meet code, obviously you have to have a shutoff in the house.
So all the supply to the house flows through the flow.
Exactly. So it's really neat. It just gives you the overall picture, and people they love it. They really like it.
That is awesome.
And it's been really fun to watch our homeowners embrace and use this technology. It's not something that they just check once a month or whatever to make sure when they get a high bill. Like, these guys have the alerts set up. They know when something's going on, and Sense is coming out with some really interesting features on the security side.
So not just the Passivhaus, but your other Fagin Partners projects, you're putting in flows and Sense.
Yeah, and there was one of the homeowners that I've talked about. He opted for it. He wanted it. Another one, I just wanted to monitor the house, and when the thing costs $275, your barrier to entry is pretty low. It's worth having that information to me, to have an out-of-pocket expense for it. Mm-hmm. So. And it's not even my house. That's the thing. So,
back to using it as a sales tool. Since it hasn't sold yet, it's a little hard to tell. But when they're looking at this thing and it says that the house is with the lights on and the air going and it's running at that current time at 4 cents a minute or an hour or 6 cents an hour, that's pretty impressive. And then. The other thing with the Sense Monitor, we have a friend, we actually have one in here somewhere getting ready to put in for a friend. He has a rental property, and it has a back house, garage apartment.
Sub-metering.
And so he says they're always, bitching about how much electricity that the other one really spent or didn't, and he sort of has to guess, and so he's putting one in he'll know exactly now.
That's smart.
Yeah. So it's neat. We'll just take the house's consumption, because the power goes from the pole through the house to the back house. We're just going to monitor the house, and you can back out the back house each month and get an exact number.
That is awesome.
So there are a ton of applications.
Yeah,
it's really
what
neat.
You guys are doing, man, this is how the industry culture shifts. It doesn't just suddenly make a right turn. It gradually the super tanker shifts. We did not finish talking about the difference between conventional and VRF from the power data that you're collecting.
Yeah.
Data points there?
So this has been an interesting project because, like I said, this house is on the same block as a number of other houses that we built. I think in all, what are we at? 7?
Yeah.
7 on this single, street in Midway Hollow here in Dallas. So the thing that's been interesting is, having the Passivhaus right there on the same block as these other houses that I'm monitoring. I have nearly identical orientations. I can control for square footage. The temperature and humidity numbers are identical.
Yeah.
You really don't get in the real world much closer to an apples to apples comparison of a conventional construction home with green features and something like the Passivhaus that's takes it to the next level. So it's been really interesting to, I'll call, Joe and say, hey, do you mind leaving your AC on 71 for me the whole day, going about your day normally, and so I can just compare these two. He's great with it. He loves it. He loves the Passivhaus. And so I can really compare these two houses in identical conditions, same geographic area, same orientation, and really see the differences between how these two houses perform. And it's interesting because not only is the passive house overall consumption lower, you would expect to see that, but when you look at a graph of the consumption over the course of a day, on the conventional construction, there's spikes, tons of spikes, and they're not small ones. Exactly. And it's bouncing all around. And I believe that there are 3 zones in that house, so it's 3 zone for, each. But the spike, it's interesting because, the way that the VRF Mitsubishi systems work is they're variable capacity. And so, they can run as low as 10% capacity? 15%. 15% capacity all the way up to 100. Whereas even though we put in, dual speed, variable speed, setups in the conventional construction home, we still have huge spikes because it's the same as a car having 2 gears or 1 gear versus infinite gears. It's just it's able to avoid the spikes. It is can run for shorter periods of time at higher capacity if needed, or lower capacity for a long period of time for something like dehumidification. That's not something that even the upgraded above and beyond systems that we put in these conventional construction homes can offer.
So what about the numbers? How high are these things going?
Ton for ton. The Mitsubishi is vastly lower. It doesn't have the on and off. Think of it as almost like a light switch sort of spikes that we see in this other house. And overall, if we had a time of use sort of building here in Texas, the Mitsubishi would be an absolutely no-brainer just from that standpoint. Aside from the fact that the overall consumption is vastly lower, ton for ton. These VRF systems just make so much more sense for especially our climate, but for other even milder climates. We have a pretty extreme climate here. It's very humid, can be very, very hot. I think the average one day this past summer was 111, and
very hot this.
Yeah, and those aren't temperatures that most mechanical setups are designed to. But at the end of the day, the passive house had zero problem keeping up. It was maintaining set temp.
And you keep it relatively low, right?
Yeah, and
72 or 70?
So we keep it typically on 70 or 71. And, with our other houses, we'll keep them on 74 when they're on the market, try to save some money. But I need the numbers out of this house, and I know that. So it's worth, with this house, it doesn't cost us really anything, maybe 15 extra bucks a month or something to keep it on a temperature that would be reasonable for an occupant if they were, working from home and there all day. Mm-hmm. And we have, the lights. A lot of the lights are on these Wi-Fi dimmers that we have set up to, turn on and off throughout the day, and at night especially. It'll make it look like someone's at home. So it's not like the house is sitting dormant on 70 or 71 with no activity. We've got the recirculating pump running about every 30 minutes. It just, runs as needed. But we've got lights on. But again, we've got LED in both the conventional construction home and, this passive house. So, the lighting load on this house is negligible.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right, so have you guys monitored your own home? Any lessons learned there?
Yeah, we've monitored our own homes. It's funny because we'll, be talking to people and telling them about the passive house, and they'll turn to Kyle and be like, so do you live in a really efficient house? And you want to tell them a little bit about your house?
I live in a house that was built in 1930, and it is the antithesis of the passive house. And
the leaky house.
It's the leaky house. Yeah, we've got many air changes and air going on here. And I guess it was maybe a month and a half ago, Connor was dinking around with the sense on my house. He goes, Dad, I got some really bad news for you. And I was like, oh, what is it? And he said, your pool pump uses as much energy as the passive house. And I was like,
that's in a given day. It's crazy.
Like, that is not good. So
that is not good.
We traded that out for a much more economical pool pump, and I think we cut the cost on it by 80-something percent, 85%.
Yeah, it strikes me that making the invisible visible is a theme here, and it just strikes me that the electric grid, the energy, the resource consumption, and the space and the logistics of the power lines all around. This is a massive machine. And yet, we, the end users, to us, it's largely invisible. We don't even know. The only time we really know is when we pay our utility bills. But those are triggered by a credit card or an automatic debit now, so we don't even see that.
And it's too late. By the time you get it, you've already run the bill.
That's right. It's retroactive. Like our cars, even if it's a Tesla, you have to go get some fuel somewhere every once in a while. So there's some tangible relationship
being used, right?
Say that again.
You know how much fuel is being used because you have a gauge.
Yeah. So our house, it's just so we need data. We need to do this. Did you do any data collection in the Passive House related to air quality?
I did. We had a Fubot monitor, and I reached out to them, and they, helped me analyze the data and sift through it. And what was interesting is with, the filters that we have in there that are essentially, one step down from hospital grade filters, just coupled with the fact that the house is well ventilated, the stale air in the house is exhausted, it's well circulated.
What's your CO2? Yeah.
Well, the problem was the CO2 meter was not sensitive enough to pick up our CO2 levels in the house. So we abandoned that whole deal. The particulate matter numbers, were super low, and the CO2 level was stuck on 450, and it was lower than that. So
wow,
we tried, but one of the problems too.
Your house was too clean for the.
Yeah, and I was really proud. I was like, darn, too bad. But at the end of the day, it's a little hard because the reason that I think that the Sense monitor and the Flow water monitor are making a difference is because it gives people access to information. It lets them understand how the house is performing, what the conditions
like a dashboard.
are.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's just
how
access
the
to
things
information.
they do are affecting their
reality.
And a lot of times, if you give people the option and they understand what they stand to gain by making a change or something like that, they'll do it. They'll do it because who doesn't want to save money? It doesn't matter if you have a 1,400 square foot apartment or 8,000 square foot house. Money's money, And so if you give people the access to this information, let them take these insights, form their own insights, and adjust their behavior from there. You don't have to crank your AC up to 76 to be comfortable in this, to have a reasonable electricity bill in the summer. It's probably your pool pump, But the thing is, by unveiling this whole deal and understanding the breakdown and where things are coming from and how it all works together and comes together, you're able to get the low-hanging fruit that you didn't even know, was there.
I think that's a decent place to end. Any final thoughts, either one of you?
I just think that another one of our hopes is that over time people will come to understand how these things impact them, how they impact the environment, that, really smarter way to do things is smaller and better. And I think things are heading that way. In Europe, passive is the standard now in almost every country. So we're a little bit behind the 8 ball, but we're doing what we can and trying to do what we can to help move things that direction.
Well said.
And I think one thing that we've been talking about lately is, I don't think that we necessarily want anyone to think that passive is the only way to accomplish some of these goals that we set out to do. And it doesn't have to be a passive house. It doesn't to be efficient. It really, it's just doing what you can, and it's the small things that in the end make a difference. And whether you're building passive or you're building just a spec home built to code. Kyle and I feel like we do have some level of responsibility as builders, as far as our homeowners are concerned and for their benefit, and just because what we build today. This house has a life cycle. It's going to be there for a long time, and so it's not all about first cost. It's important that we consider the different options. And go about it in as informed of a way as possible, because at the end of the day, we are baking in both emissions and costs for our homeowners.
Absolutely.
And, so it's really not all about first cost. We have a responsibility to do the right thing by them. And so it really shouldn't just come down to the money, because a lot of times with a lot of these new technologies or options or tweaks, you end up saving money in the end. It's just a matter of engaging with the topic and figuring out what the best way to attack it is.
I think helping people to make informed decisions at every point along the way is what we are obligated to do, and then what they decide, that's up to them.
Fascinating, wonderful, great conversation. Thank you for your caring and your curiosity that is leading our world forward. And thank you all for listening. We'll talk at you next time.